So I just sent out an announcement, which should get to you as an email, for your next exam. Your next exam will be on April 4th / April 7th, depending on when you have your lab. Okay? I've also, in that email, I attached a practice exam for you to, practice on. So, regardless, I will be going over that practice exam on Monday. So not Monday, but next Tuesday, because not this upcoming Thursday, but the Thursday after is when I want to do the project proposals. So that kind of leaves doing this next week. So you've got a week to review this practice exam before I go over it in class if you want to get a chance to go over it. I'll be going over pretty much all the pointed questions, whereas the non-pointed questions, the extra practice, those will probably be good practice for you later. Okay? So there's a number of good questions in there that I've included. And a number of good extra credit questions. But for Module 10, you'll notice that it's bereft of material, right? Because for the most part, we've hit the end of our curriculum, believe it or not. I do move at a pretty quick pace, yes, but also it's partially so that we can do this final project. Today, I'm going to be going over version control, specifically GitHub and how that works. I'm going to be showing you basically what my not quite finished final project looks like. It's very kind of minimal right now, but we'll be covering on Thursday. I'll be going over a bit more of the project requirements, although I did pretty in-depth. I did what I typically do on Thursday last Thursday, so I'll probably do some more coding there. So then next week is the review and the proposal, and the week after that we'll get into regular expressions, which is technically an optional part of the class if you've basically been doing everything you need to so far. However, if you need to take exam 3, you'll need to, that will be a topic on exam 3. So to remind you, exams 1 and 2 and 3 are best 2 out of 3. Okay? Just to remind you, you take 3 exams and I drop one of those exams. The final exam, furthermore, is the form. I found a format that I like, and I'm going to keep doing it because finals, there's a lot of final exams typically that need to be graded, and so I like being able to grade them, 9 million questions. So it's very simple. There's going to be 7 questions. You choose 5 of them. That's it. They're going to be large questions, 20 points apiece, large multi-step questions, but I mean, they cover most of the bases there. One of the questions is always a regular expression question. One of the questions, which interestingly enough, you might think is unfair, but it generally, when the students who attempt this question do very well on this, is something that I've not taught in this class. Like literally, it asks you something that I give you, hey, here is something X that exists in Python. We haven't gone over it in class. Here's some of the documentation for it. Now use X to solve the following problem. Basically, it's a question that asks, have you learned Python well enough that you can read this small amount of documentation and apply it to this problem? And the vast majority of students who attempt that one get it right. And a lot of students attempt that one. So I'll go over the final exam as we get closer. But there's, but this is where class gets interesting because I get to be a bit more freeform about it. So if we go back to the modules for a second, also you may have gotten another notification from me earlier that I pushed the due date of homework 8 back, PIG, because I noticed that there was just too much stuff due too soon, right? So the homework 8, which is worth 200 points, I've just pushed that back to April 9th. Yes?
So if you're confident if your exam 1 and exam 2 grades,
yeah, you can just skip it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're like, I've got 90 in exam 1 and 95 in exam 2, or whatever the grades are, you can be like, it's not worth the effort. Yeah, totally, you can do that. Or you can come to the class, you can come to the exam anyway, take the exam without studying, get whatever it is, and just get treated as extra practice for the final. It's because I'll be giving that final exam pretty much the last day of class. Sorry, that exam 3, the last possible days that we can give it. Like, last day of classes, very end of April. So, because it'll be right up to that. Because again, it kind of serves as a makeup exam for students who needs it as well, or a chance to boost your grade. Okay, so Module 10, we have the Preposal and GitHub lab. Right, in this lab, we're going to brainstorm for our final project and think about various options. Basically, this is brainstorming. It does not need to be very extremely. This doesn't need to be thought out. In fact, I'll fill it out kind of as I'll kind of backfill it, like what I would have done had I been filling out the Preposal before I did what I was working on. But what we do is, what you need to do for it is fill out this preposal.md, which I'll get into that. You're going to submit a website URL. Now, you may notice that that is only 5 points, but that's the but pay attention to what category that 5 points is in. Those 5 points are in your final project grade, okay? Your final project grade is made up of an assignment that is 5, 10, 20, and 100. So there's a grand total of 135 points in your final project grade. Your final project is worth 100 points. The vast majority of students get a 90 on the final project. So this means that you'll get a total of 125 out of 135, which is a fairly decent chunk on that final project. Okay. And that's just for completing the steps as we go. Here, again, there is no Dropbox for this. Instead, you got to submit a website URL. That website URL is towards your GitHub repo. So now, last year I started playing a game called RimWorld, and I really like RimWorld. And one thing that it shares in common with games that have been that go on for a while and very popular among content creators, which I am not, is mods, because mods kind of add infinite replayability. There's a reason that Skyrim still is selling copies and still is still coming out with new versions or whatnot. It's because the modding community keeps it alive, and that there's about 1 million things you can do. You can turn, you can turn all the dragons into Thomas the Tank Engines with the right mod. It's hilarious. Anyway, so I play RimWorld, and that's a game where basically we do. That's a game where there's a huge modding community. It's a sci-fi game. You crash land on a planet and you try to survive. Part of this is that you create backstories for characters. The characters, they get generated. They have backstories that give them stat bonuses or stat malices. In other words, it makes them better or worse. It might prevent them from doing certain tasks. But there's a lot of, because there's only so many, you eventually start to see them like the same ones again and again. So what I wanted to do was add more backstories to this, to the game. And basically also part of this was to learn some very, very basic modding, because all this was XML, just doing some XML coding. But I wanted to get a basic mod under my belt before I tried something more advanced, like adding religious dietary restrictions into the game. Yeah, I know, that's quite the leap. But there's a lot of different things. But the game's fairly in-depth. So what you see here is what's referred to as a GitHub repo or repository. In fact, you may or may not have noticed that I've had a link to one the entire time under important links. Right? Other important links. You can find a bunch of the code I write here on github.com/abrosen. That's my username on GitHub. Classroom. You'll note that like when I publish stuff online, especially when it's related to me academically or something I try to do, that I actually am a weirdo who uses their actual name as their username. I don't do everything under my username. I actually have quite a number of aliases I use online, depending on the task. But it's about compartment. So that's kind of just something to think about, compartmentalizing thing. Basically, if it's something that, for instance, I have a few Reddit accounts. One Reddit account is Andrew_Rosen, which I use to respond to questions on the Temple subreddit occasionally, right? But I don't necessarily want my, let's say, hot takes of current events to be tied to, my professional stuff. So completely different account that's not tied to me, right? It's compartmentalizing thing. Okay. So here again, there's tons of code from various classes and different documents, but let's go ahead and look at this. But these are GitHub repositories. These are basically, this is basically my code on the cloud, but in a bit more of a powerful format. The idea here is that you can, when you click on something, actually let's go to my project, you can see I've made 33 commits, as they've called. These are essentially 33 checkpoints or save points that I've done on the project as I've been working on it. Okay, initial commit, and you'll note different notices, right? And a couple of these are this AI notification. So over here, right, I put in an AI preview picture. And then on this commit, I deleted that AI preview picture and replaced it with one that I made myself because I had a placeholder preview picture. So I used the AI to make a placeholder. Then I made one myself, which had a bit more character in there. And then, and you can, and this is one of those really cool things you can check out with these things. Let's just go ahead and open some others. You can see, okay, let's take a look at this particular file, right? Sorry, about. And we can see, okay, what is the history of these files? Like the, specifically the preview picture. We can see, hey, this is the picture that I use as a preview. It pops up on, in whatever mod manager you use. You go to history and you can see, right over here on March 8th, I created the initial picture, which was the AI picture. And March 9th, I replaced it with the current version. So you can see these snapshots, and that's what every commit is. It keeps track of all these snapshots as you are developing the code. That's at least if you're using it as an individual. The main way that this is used, I mean, in corporate environments and large team environments, this is done with using branches. You create what's called a branch off the main trunk of this, and you work on your main branch independently to add a feature to the code. So if you're, again, working on a mod or something, you might add a new weapon, you might add a new type of grass, a new type of crop. And when you're done, and that can be done independently of what everybody else is doing. And then you say, hey, here's what I added. Can you please integrate this into the main code? You can, and it should not, and hopefully it's not going to conflict with anything. And if it can, it will, it can easily be resolved. Or as XKCD puts it, okay, Git. This is Git. It tracks collaborative work on projects through a beautiful distributed graph theory tree model. Cool. How do we use it? No idea. Just memorize these shell commands and type them to sync up. If you get errors, save your work elsewhere, delete the project, and download a fresh copy. It is. It is pretty funny, actually, how unfortunately accurate that is. And so the way you're going to be using this is as kind of a way. So yes, it's the way that it's intended to be used is not necessarily how you're going to be using it in this class, which is you're going to use it for two reasons. One, you're going to use it as a way to make sure that your code is basically online and able to be seen by me, and able to, and you have snapshots of your code so that you're not going to lose your work if you lose your computer, right? The second reason is because basically a way to develop a portfolio. A lot of people, one of my friends who currently works at Google, he got his interview at Google by somebody finding his code on GitHub. So they reached out and directed him there. It was a very interesting turn of events for him based off that. GitHub works as a portfolio of sorts for the things you're doing. And it is a very professional thing. Now, that being said, while I do say it has to be hosted on GitHub, if you are already in the know, I don't mind if you host it on GitLab or something else or some other server, right? But GitHub's the primary one. It got acquired by Microsoft a number of years ago. It's really robust. It's free to use. They really want to entice students to use it, so they'll use it professionally. All right. So the way it works is pretty straightforward, and I'm going to show, rather than wasting time on showing the shell commands, which, well, I'll briefly show them. They might, the primary way of, the old way of using GitHub might be doing something like this, OneDrive /documents. Let's go with /GitHub / let's take a look at my data structures textbook, right? If I make, so I'm working on a data structures textbook because I hate the textbook industry. So I'm trying to make this as freely available as possible when I finish it. But, right, let's go ahead and, even better idea. No. We're going to go to my even better ideas to reward you from being here. CD teaching. Right, this is the place where I keep my exams and stuff. And right now, I'm currently working on making your quiz for this following for this current Friday and Monday. This is what I've currently got, which is a problem to, you can see count the most common words. And so let's see. I think actually I want to add some space between the name and to here. And I'm doing this in a typesetting language called LaTeX. So I want to add some more space and make it a bit more even. So I'm going to add a, let's see. I believe I need to add let's just go ahead and grab that, a VSpace stretch. And we're going to go ahead and add that in between our command to make a name. And then instead of putting that there, we will put a stretch, which will even out the amount of space. Ooh, I probably need to put that at the bottom. But I run it, I compile it, because what this does is that this gets translated into a document to display to you. No, that pushed it down. I want it to be even, so I need to put a stretch down there as well. Right? Okay. And now, so over here, right, I'm putting this in. It's more justified. It's in the center like that. I may or may not keep it like that, but let's go ahead and save that change. I'm going to upload it so that I can work, and I'm going to upload these changes to GitHub so I can work on this at home. So the way you would typically do that if I was working in the command line or on Linux or something is I'd use some commands. I'd say something like git commit -a for all. It says, hey, these are the files I've changed. And then I would say, using Vim, I would say changed the formatting and spacing. Escape :WQ. That's Vim. Don't worry about Vim. And then I would git push it. I'd say, hey, let's make our snapshots, and then I'm gonna push uploads the snapshots. You need to know exactly none of that because fortunately, that's basically you would need to know the commands add, commit, push, pull. That would be it. But honestly, it's made it a lot easier these days to make changes, which I'll show with my with the mod I'm working on how you make changes. Okay, but if we go to my AB Rosen and I check out my private repository, my /teaching teaching, which is where, again, I keep my exams and stuff. And I go to, and you see, there's the message I typed out, which is the change I made. Changed the format as spacing, which that's a weird message I wrote. I meant to do, say, and spacing. And if I go into the quiz folder, which is where I'm keeping my quizzes, dictionary.pdf, you'll see that here's the file, the code I modified, right, with the vspace.stretch there. And here's the PDF, right? So all I have to do when I get home is I can just simply hit a button on an app I have, and it downloads it automatically. Yes, I could manually do it with like something like Google Cloud, but what makes this more useful for code is that I can go through the history of the code. As I've changed, I can see the specific history of a file as that file changes throughout time. And if I want to undo a change, suddenly that becomes a lot easier. Right now, though, it's a glorified, it's basically right now for you, it's going to be a cloud service that you basically, store additional snapshots. Okay. So, in reality, what we do is that we use you can use basically the GitHub desktop to do everything. I'm currently working in the repository Rows and Backstories. I'll show you. I will go through the process of making a new repository and starting it, and I'm going to kind of show you by the time we get to the end of this, I'm going to show you how we do what I'm expecting you to have turned in. Okay? So, but the way this works is that, let's see. As you're working on it, I would work on my code. So over here, I'm going to go into the folders, and they're nested that way. And I have the idea for another backstory based off of Starship Troopers. So I'll go ahead and let's go ahead and grab one. I will make some changes. I will say so this will be the unique ID for it, and I'm going to call it Starship Troopers, right? And then what we can do is I'll need to give it a title. I'm just going to go through the motions. I'm not actually going to spend the entire time uploading it, right? Let's see, so maybe, oh, no. All right, the name, Mobile Infantry. And then we'll call it Infantry as the title short. And then I'll just save this for later. I'll also write down my later ideas here in a comment, which is use the long war and armor. Okay. So there we go. And I've made the changes. The GitHub app detects that I've made the changes. You can see that here. And let's go ahead and comment it out because I'm not ready to actually have it be part of the game yet. And again, all I'm doing is just using XML. Here, this is just very basic editing. And I'm not going to waste the time booting up the mod for everybody, booting up RimWorld for everybody. Not going to waste everybody's time there, but to show it in effect. But what we've got here is, let's see, we've got added some adding, because I've not finished it, adding some sci-fi ideas. Commit to main. So commit, again, makes a snapshot, right, of this. Okay? Ooh, in fact, maybe I'll update the about page. I'm going to go to defs. I'm going to go to my about page, and I'm going to update this readme.md, which is a big file, which is probably this is the file that basically shows all the explanation of what GitHub repo is about. I'll explain the MD in just a bit, but you can see it over here. It's very easy to read code. It's got a hash mark here that's just kind of for a major heading, a exclamation point, a subtitle, and then the link, right? And some classic old sci-fi. Hit enter. So I'm going to make another commit. Modified about. Commit to main. And now you'll see over here there's a button that says push to origin. The origin being my, GitHub in this case. And I just push it. It refreshes and says, hey, now it's all up to date. And all I have to do now is hit view on GitHub, and we can see that last change now, right? So it just got changed. We can see that this got changed and that I made my changes here. Now, on the flip side, I'm going to pretend that I was doing this on a different computer, right? You can actually edit files in the browser on GitHub, but I'm going to pretend that this was done on maybe my home desktop, or my partner made some changes. On continual forced deployment, right? Armor was very good. It was one of the few, it's one of the many books that's written as kind of a response to the book of Starship Troopers, which is very different than the movie Starship Troopers. Very good stuff. Armor definitely went over kind of the psychological effects of what happens if you keep getting thrown into dangerous situations again and again and again and again. So anyway, I've made my change there on this page, right? And if I know I've made a change, I can just simply hit this button to refresh. And it says, hey, you pushed some stuff changed, you need to pull it. And now doing that, it updates on my local machine. All right. So, but this is what I've basically done. I made a mod for a game. It's a very basic mod. It just changes backstories and stuff. It's not very exciting, but it required me to kind of learn the system. It's good. If I didn't know the amount of work that went into this, and didn't know how easy or hard this was, I'd probably give this project, a 90. Because I know how much effort I'd put into this, I'd probably give this project an 80, my own project, because it really was not that hard. But honestly, when you show me stuff, I'm not going to necessarily know, and I'm going to err on the side of, it was probably harder than I think it was. So keep that in mind. In other words, I'm fairly generous with this. So for your Preposal, what we want to do is, so let's get into what I want you to do for the upcoming lab. What I want you to do is download this Preposal file. This Preposal file is a markdown file, which you can open in any text editor. Any text editor. By default, right now, if I double click on it, it's just going to open up in VS Code, right? But you can, and Windows will suggest, or Mac will suggest stuff. If you're in Notepad, if you're in Windows, you can open it in Notepad, no problem. If you're on a Mac, I'm not sure what it will open with. But if you are at your wit's end, guess what you can do? Idle. This is really stupid, but it works. You open. Go to where you downloaded the file. Oh, it opens only Python files? Actually, you can open any file. It doesn't care. Preposal.md. And there it is. It's not got any of the highlighting because it doesn't understand what Markdown is, but there, you can edit it. So you do have a tool to edit it. This is and the Markdown file is very, very short, as you can see, for the Preposal. It is, what ideas do you have? You don't have to, this is ideas. You don't have to commit to anything yet. Okay, this is your brainstorming document, right? That's the hardest part of that. 2, if you plan on collaborating with 1 or 2 other classmates, who are they? Right? Are you working with group members? If so, start figuring that out. Make sense? So 1, brainstorm actual content. 2, administrative stuff. 3, are there any questions? Do you have any questions for the project? Should I be asking any questions? This is kind of to prompt you, maybe I should ask Professor Rosen about this. And your goal is to just fill in these to-dos with something else. With something actually worthwhile. So what we're going to do is that we're going to create a GitHub repo to host this, and then we're going to modify it, okay? So to make a GitHub repo, it's actually fairly straightforward. You create an account on GitHub. It can be your account name can be whatever you want. Just know that you're going to be sending me your repo, which means I'm going to see your username. So it's probably best to not have anything particularly nasty in your username. I mean, use some common sense, but I mean, and to create a repo, it's not that hard at all. You would say, here's my main profile, but on the main page for GitHub, this is the main page that you'll see as you're logged in here, and under repos you'll see new. Or if you're over here and you go to your repositories, you'll see new over here. But the point is that a repository is basically your project. It's a repository because it's where you're storing code. Hit new. You need a name. If you don't have a good name for your project, although you'll probably call it only has to be unique to your account, right? You can name I can have 1 million students call their CIS final project, and it's not going to cause an issue. But if you need, it will suggest one for you. I'll call this Fuzzy Palm Tree because why not? An example final project. This is probably the most important part right here, this next part. By default, it's set to public. Don't change that. The way that the vast majority of students get a 0, temporarily I should add, a temporary 0 on their final project, is that they set their final project to private. Don't do that. That means when you send me a link to your repository, I can't see it, and if I can't see it, I can't see that you actually did anything. Fortunately, because everything on GitHub will be timestamped, when you do make it public, I'll be able to say, aha, so you did turn it in at this time, and this was not actually a ploy to try to get extra time. Initialize this repository with a README file. Yeah, sure. You can or cannot. That's fine. GitHub, add a git ignore, and choose a license. Let's see, what a license do we use? I recommend either MIT or, let's see what we have here. GNU LGPL. What's unlicensed? What is unlicensed? Learn more about licenses. Ignore the git ignore. You don't need that. There's different software licenses and different licenses for creative works. And this is kind of my spiel about open source. So open source projects are basically the backbone of the way the internet works. Pretty much as everything is built on an open source structure. Right? Here we go. The internet pretty much looks like this. All modern digital infrastructure. It's a project some random person in Nebraska has thanklessly been maintaining since 2003. And this has consequences, the fact that basically all these big, huge projects occasionally depend on, much smaller code. For instance, there was the case of LeftPad a number of years ago. This was a big controversy in the Node.js community, where basically some guy had a package that he named that he had for a while taken for him and acquired for a company, and so he deleted all of his stuff, including a very simple bit of code here that a lot of packages relied on. And as a result, maintainers, a lot of people had huge numbers of dependency issues. Because a lot of modules were using this, suddenly they were not able, these things were not working anymore, and it actually caused severe damage. The morality of this is definitely something to debate in an ethics class, especially with the full story behind it. But suffice to say, this is what when we say random projects that this is a random project and supporting everything. Yeah, this is the way a lot of stuff works on the internet. A lot of stuff works on open source software, and it's a thankless kind of job. A huge number of your servers that you're getting internet from run on Linux, which is open source software. One of the key principles of open source software is that it's free software. This is the dual meaning of free. Free as in it doesn't cost any money, and free as in free speech. So free beer and free speech is kind of the way they say it. Free as in free beer, free as in free speech. Meaning that anybody can kind of take it and do what they want with it. And so part of the way, but if you don't necessarily want somebody to do what they want with your code, there are licenses you can use to basically say, here's the permissions I'm giving on the license. For instance, in my data structures textbook, I believe I have a license. And if not, I'll add it. But, yes, I say the work is funded by Temple University's Northrop Press under a Creative Commons non-attribution, non-commercial license. Basically saying, hey, this is the license for my book if you want to use it. It is, you can share the book, you can remix it, and you can remix it however you want. It's my book. You can transform it in, and you can take it in and make it your own book if you want to. As long as you give me credit for the initial work, because I have an ego that needs to be satisfied, and as long as you're not selling it, it's a non-commercial purpose. I'm not. This is a textbook I'm writing not to make any money, so it'd be a real trashy thing if you made money off of it too. Okay. That's basically so. So there's a lot of stuff there. And choose a license does go over that. For that, I recommend MIT because this is a basic project. You're probably not going to be doing anything much with it. It's a way to basically say, hey, you can do anything you want with it, and if it breaks your system, that's not my fault. You're the one, and another one is this one that says GNU GPL that gets into basically stuff that says, hey, you can modify your code, but your code also has to use the same license. You can't sell it. You gotta make it open source. Actually, I think you can sell it. You just gotta make it open source. There's a lot of different licenses there. Now, finally, why am I bringing this up? If you're deciding to make a video game or anything that requires music or artwork that you don't make, I recommend looking for stuff if you want to make it in the most professional way possible in terms of doing it correctly and not having quote unquote stolen stuff from the internet. You want to use stuff that's basic assets that are licensed under the Creative Commons license. So if I go to let's say with texture pack, right? Let's go with the texture pack image. You can select all licenses over here. And you can do this in Google as well. You can search by license and say, hey, is it Creative Commons? Is it public domain? And you can go through those various things. And that will mean, hey, this is something that I actually have permission to. Yes, I didn't make this, but I totally actually do have actual permission to use this, which is a pretty cool way of doing it. Okay, so that's why I bring it up. Anyway, going back to this. So we are creating a new repo. I got a little sidetracked, but it was the appropriate time to get that sidetrack done. Make sure it's public, add a README file. Don't worry about git ignore. This is just simply saying, hey, if you're working in a language like C where it's got all these extra files that it makes as it compiles something and you don't want to keep track of those, which you probably don't, then we're going to ignore those files. And you hit create repository. Okay, example final project. What we can do pretty easily is we can go over here to code. You can click open with GitHub desktop on here to open it, and it will automatically open. Or you can find it in GitHub desktop yourself, because I recommend you use the app unless you're using Linux like a madman, in which case you've got your own kind, in which case I have faith in you and you actually don't need my directions. Clone repository. That's the term we use to create a local copy. You clone it, creating a copy. Okay, I called it fuzzy something. What was it? Fuzzy palm tree. So I'm gonna hit refresh on this because it didn't update yet. Fuzzy palm tree, here it is. And I'm gonna choose to put it into my GitHub folder. And I'm gonna call it, select folder. Yeah, in my GitHub folder, this is the default place. It just didn't come up in the default place because I had modified it when I was creating the code for the game. Hit clone. And it's got some useful buttons in here. You can open the project directly in Visual Studio Code, like so. And you can see it opens up the project like this. You can also just open it up in your Explorer, like so, and it'll open up your file. It'll open up your file browser, be it Explorer or whatever, or Finder for a Mac. And you can click this button to open up the web page, the web URL. All right. The easiest way to add your Preposal is two ways. You can either drag it into here, or, because I always like showing you how to do multiple things, you can hit this plus button, create a new file, upload a new file. You can just directly upload files to your repository. Right? I'm going to go ahead and add this Preposal. And see here it changed and says, hey, it's got this. Found. New. So added. Actually, I like that auto-generated one just fine. And now let's go ahead and open up the Preposal. And this is kind of what I would expect you to do for this project. So we've made a repository, right? We've added our Preposal file. And now over here, we've got this Markdown file. Now, so as I mentioned, MD stands for Markdown, and that's Markdown as opposed to Markup. For instance, HTML, hypertext markup language, right? It's a file for basically creating code that gets rendered and displayed on your screen in some way. Markdown is meant to be a much stripped down, simplified version of this. Basically, get out of your way, just simply make very simple, easy to render stuff. So what ideas do I have? Let's see, what ideas do I have for doing a file project? A musical VST using, I think it's called Juice. Using the Juice framework. Another idea might be a game. A RimWorld mod, a Stardew Valley mod, who do I plan on collaborating with? I plan on collaborating with Alice Awesome Face and Gene Eric, right? Those are two classmates everybody knows. And let's see. Do I have any questions? If I make a game mod, do I have to make all the assets myself? Question mark. That's sufficient for your Preposal. There you go. And that's all you really need here. The kind of stuff. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. I'm going to go ahead and modify this. Push origin. And notice what the changes that have been made. It gives you the changes that have been made. Minus to do, so it got rid of the to do, and so it got rid of the lines in red, added the lines in green. Commit, push the origin, and if we were to open up the, didn't change, sorry, commit this, push origin, there, I didn't actually push it. Now, if you want GitHub, we can see that, hey, here's the Preposal file, and here's the Preposal.markdown. And notice that when I look it up, it doesn't look the way it did as it is as code. GitHub automatically renders your markdown files. So the big tick mark, the big hash mark for Preposal is like your big title. Kind of your big is your title. And then you might think of two hash marks as a section or subsection, right? And then you can do things like, oh, this rendered poorly, right? All in one line. Let's go ahead and make this a list. Edit. How do I make it a list? I do it like this. 1, 2, 3. Commit changes. Made those ideas a unordered list. This is going to be such a good example. Ordered list. Okay. Commit changes, and now you can see here it's by adding dashes in front of everything, it created a unordered list for me, right? Dots, and then if I indented and added more dashes, it would automatically indent and change those dots. It's actually very intuitive kind of way to do it. You can read up on how to do Markdown. You don't need but it's a very easy way to make your stuff look nice and professional. Let's go ahead and edit this some more. Alice and Jean. Okay. Another unordered list. Now, then that means that Mr. Gene Eric can download his copy he can clone his own repository, and he can see it on his computer, and he can modify this repository however he wants. Make sense? Yes, what's your question?
Does Discord use the same message formation as here?
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty much, yeah, I think, I think Discord uses their own version of Markdown. GitHub actually uses their own specific flavor of Markdown. If you're interested in Markdown, you can look down here at the Markdown guide, which, again, the syntax is very easy. You use the ticks to denote different heading levels. You can get up to 6. You can have other different ways of showing that. How to do paragraphs, right? Which is just you do paragraphs pretty naturally. You don't have to put paragraph markers, right? You can italicize by doing stars or by underscoring. Sorry, bold. Yes?
It is just like this.
Yeah. You can italicize by using single stars, right? So it's very intuitive. It's used in a lot of places, and it just simply renders into something that is very easy just kind of to read. Okay? Now, let's suppose that Gene, he made an edit like this, right? He changed this. But Alice, okay, she's working on her laptop, and she notices, oh no, we have our, these are not going to render correctly because they're not in the list format, right? So I need to make sure that they render correctly. And so she looks up the the Markdown for list, and goes, and the first item we see is ordered list. And so Alice, being awesome, says, maybe I'll make it an ordered list rather than an unordered list. And so she does this on her changes. 1, 2, 3 to make it an ordered list. And meanwhile, so she made these changes to change these same lines that have been already changed on her local copy. Okay. So now she's like, great, I'm going to go ahead and make my change. Made ordered list. Commit. So notice that what I've committed here and what I've committed online are different. This is going to cause an issue, but but that's the point of this entire exercise. Push origin. It's going to tell me newer commits on row. remote, so we got to get those and download those first. Okay? You can't update while there's stuff there. So pull. And a lot of times if there's conflicts, like you added some additional lines, they added some different lines different somewhere else, it's going to automatically make those changes and merge them, right? The vast majority of the time, you will not get this message. However, right, I made changes, so Gene made changes to make things an unordered list. Alice made changes to make it an ordered list on the exact same lines. There's no way to automatically do that. So what we're going to do is we are going to, it tells you what are we going to do. And notice over here, I opened it in Visual Studio Code. And notice now over here, it's showing me in the Preposal file that I have that the file got bigger. It's got both the changes in there. And it's got the following. It says head, which is the current change. So we recognize the change I've done over here. And here's the change that I downloaded that I got from online. Make sense? Now, if you're working in VS Code, there's ways to automatically resolve this. Accept current change versus the incoming change. Accept both changes. Right? I can like, I'll complete them both. Or you can even just do what I'm going to do. Or you can just even manually mess with it and do it. But, so it's basically saying, hey, if there's a conflict, figure out which version you want to keep. This is very rare. And honestly, if this happens, it's a good thing. It's almost a good thing because it means that two of you were working on this project independently, which is good because you were making progress. And using GitHub to do so, which is extra good. So in this case, I'm just going to say, hey, I like the unordered list better. Accept incoming changes. Save the file. It says continue the merge. Great. And it goes like it's been resolved. Awesome. Push. Done. And now if we go onto onto GitHub again, we'll see that, right? That what we have over here is that we have a merge of a branch here. So if we see the history, made ordered list, merge, and we'll see that that these two different branches got merged and changed with each other. But this is what I'd expect for you to, but this is really all you need to do for this. Just fill this out. Also, if you're having trouble just opening up in a text editor, right, just make the new repository, the create new button, or go over to the main GitHub page and hit the new repo button over here, right? And once you're in your repo, you can do this completely online for this first part. Upload your file. And then you can go over here, click on Preposal, and edit the file directly. And make your changes there. So now that we've got the Preposal out of the way, everybody caught up on this? Everybody understand? No? What did I lose you on? Okay. Does anybody have specific questions, though? Yes?
I want to list the bad ones, and I tried to create those things in there, but it's saying that I can't create anything
With a what?
with an empty record.
With an empty record? Repo. Right. So when you create a new repository, are you on this page?
Yes.
Yep. You need to come up with a name over here.
Yeah.
So let's go maybe I'll call this Super Taco. Right? And did you hit the create repository?
Yes.
And it worked? You just got this?
Yes.
Right, with this? Okay, so you got with this. Right, this is what happens when you don't have a README already, but that's okay. Because what you can easily do is you can, so if you're at this page, you can either create a new repo with a README file, or you hit this button over here, after you get the GitHub desktop app, okay? You click here, you click open link, hit clone, it'll automatically open it, hit show in repository, and you can see here now that I have my super taco right over here. Make sense? Now I can add stuff to it. Like, for instance, the Preposal file. So maybe I'll be lazy, though, and I'll say new text document, Preposal.md, just like this, right? Just to kind of simulate this. It's an empty file, but whatever. It's going to serve my purposes. Create, commit to main, publish. And now if we take a look at my now that we have a file that exists, it will actually look like this now. Okay. So if you're in an empty project, you just simply open it up. Yes?
So, I uploaded the proposal thing on my, I actually uploaded on Visual Studio Code 3, so.
Yep.
So I'm also to upload this to the GitHub as well, and then
So Visual Studio Code has because it's a Microsoft product, it integrates with GitHub very cleanly. So you can just simply work through Visual Studio Code. If it's telling you like that it wants to do GitHub stuff, you can let it do GitHub stuff. I'm just working under the assumption that some students will not be using Visual Studio Code. There's kind of two schools of thought for editors and IDEs. One is you can use basically a different IDE that's specialized on language, like using something like IntelliJ for Java and PyCharm for C for Python. And the other school of thought is learn one program that's general use for everything. I'm in the former camp, but I know a lot of people in the latter. For instance, Professor Fiore, he pretty much uses Emacs for everything. Emacs, of course, being a really old text editor. We're talking extremely old, that was designed to work on this keyboard that had a control and had meta, super, and hyper on for adding some stuff. It's useful to know one of the old ones, but especially VI because, again, as I mentioned, a lot of servers run Linux. So if you remote access one and you know VI, you can do some very quick and dirty edits that way. Yes? I use IntelliJ. It works. I like it a lot more than Eclipse. It's a lot cleaner of an interface. I do like Visual Studio Code, but you have noticed that also for a lot of languages, I enjoy using a minimalistic thing like Geany. That's just my personal preference, where basically I'm using something extremely minimalistic that all it's doing is syntax highlighting and the most basic of autocompletion. Because there's something to be said for that kind of minimalism and just kind of being able to think about that. It also was kind of useful when I was in grad school and learning a language that I hadn't done in a while. I wanted to be sure that I could reproduce what I was doing on an exam on paper, which would require me to actually know how to type those commands out without the computer actually, without the computer completing it for me. So that was part of the reason I used something minimalistic like Geany. But you have a lot of tools, unfortunately, these days, which is both great and a bit of a crutch. All right. The tools are really good, but it also just means that you got to make sure you can use them without those tools. I don't really have anything against them. It's just you want to make sure you know what you're doing in the first place. So let's take a look at, so we've seen the Preposal. We've seen it's nothing to be worried about. This is basically the entire premise of this is basically, can you follow this lecture and create a GitHub repo? Because what you do then is you just simply, to turn in the assignment, you take this link, copy and paste it into your GitHubs, into the submission for the assignment, and then you're done. That's it. Make sense? Next, you can use the same repository for everything that you're doing in this project. The next section is what would be due next week, which is the proposal. So let's go ahead and take a look at the proposal. Download. Desktop. It was already on desktop. Save. Open up the markdown file and take a look at this. Open. And it's a bit more extensive, but it's, again, nothing to stress out about because, and you can, and if you're not, again, if you come into the proposal day, which again, I'll go more detail about on Thursday, if you come into proposal day and you don't really have a good idea of what you're doing, that's okay. You don't have this fully filled out. I'll help you fill out that information. I'll help you give you the information so you can fill it out, right? Okay. What will likely be the pile of your project, right? The likely is there to let you know you don't have to commit to it. In just a sentence of two, or to summarize your project, e.g., a website that lets you sell or buy stocks, right? Not expecting you, now as I pointed out, I'm not actually expecting you to be able to build a website that actually lets you sell or buy stocks, but there is a tutorial on how to build a website that simulates the buying and selling and lets you see how much money you would lose playing the stock market. Okay. In a paragraph or more, detail your project. What will your software do? What features will it have? How it will be executed. Right? This is to, again, get you thinking about what are the discrete parts of the project it needs to do. For my project, I'd say, what will the software do? It will add new backstories to the RimWorld game. It will create new features that have a lot of flavor and references to various pieces of literature and other pieces of media. How it will be executed? Since it's a mod on the game, of a game, it will be run by running the game and having the mod in the mod list, right? You can use whatever technical jargon you need to, even if it's jargon that's specific to that community. There's a good chance I know it. I know way too much weird stuff, okay? This one is maybe and notice that these next ones are, if applicable, right? If you plan on doing this with a project, if you're double dipping, right? If you're doing this thing in another project. For instance, an example of this is if you're making a VST, a virtual instrument, and you happen to be taking a music technology class or a music class, right? And so you use that virtual instrument in whatever you're doing for that class. That's a totally acceptable use. Or you're doing research in another class or another project. This is generally tailored to our seniors or juniors who are doing research in something. All right. And your names again. The names of those classmates that you would work with, if any. You do not have to work in a group project. I'm not going to force to work anybody to work in groups. That can get rough. All right. This is the important part. In the world of software, stuff happens. Plans go awry. Eisenhower had a saying along the lines of, plans are useless. Planning is essential. The idea here is that, the act of planning in itself is a worthwhile thing, even if the plans you make have to get tossed into the trash. In a sentence, so basically, the idea here is you've got a month, which is both a lot of time and also not a lot of time, because you've also got a bunch of other classes besides mine. I'm aware of that. Okay? In a sentence or list of features, define a good outcome for your project, i.e., what will you accomplish no matter what? Maybe I add 20 backstories, just that add flavor. In a sentence or a list of features, define a better outcome for your final project. What do you think you can accomplish before the final project deadline? I can add maybe 30 or 40 backstories because they're like a sentence apiece. They're 2 sentences apiece. That's just, 40 ideas. I already have 28. And they will be a bit more than just flavor, but they'll actually actively disable things that colonists can do, give them guaranteed items on spawn, give them guaranteed traits, those kind of things. Like hey, I'm starting to actually add some gameplay changes here. In a sentence or a list of features, define the best outcome for your final project. What do you hope to accomplish before the final project deadline? This is the way I like to describe this is that if the stars all align and everything is right and your code always compiles and there's never any errors, what would you hope to get done? This is your naive hope, essentially. Okay, this is unrealistic, but it's good to think about. And then finally, what are your next steps? What are the next steps we're going to take for this project? All right. So I've spent the entire class going over this, which is fine because this was an important part. Hopefully now you kind of understand how to do the preposal. It's nothing to be worried about. It's a fairly straightforward idea. Find group members if you need to, or avoid people if you want to be antisocial. You know, I totally get that. Working with people can be the worst when you're forced into a group and you get that one person who doesn't do anything, always has an excuse. That's why I don't force That's why I don't force you into groups, because this is I've had cases where a person, they're planning on doing a final project with somebody, and then 2 weeks before the deadline, that person says, "Oh yeah, I withdrew from the class. Sorry. Good luck." True story. That was last semester. What a jerk. So yeah, I had to meet with the student and figure out what was feasible at that point. Stuff happens. I think it was a group of 2. So, but it happens. Sometimes, stuff comes across, like there's an emergency that I might not be privy to. Again, this is meant to be an exciting kind of experience. So what am I going to do on Thursday? Thursday, I will go over those 2 card game problems that I was planning on doing today, but I realized, I should go over the GitHub stuff today. So those red card, black card problems, for that I want to do more Monte Carlo on. And then we'll get started on the pig assignment. I mentioned, if you look at the read up for the pig assignment, right, it's an 8-part homework, which is a lot, but if you read the description, it says I'm going to do the first 4 parts in class. Now, every part is equal. So what does that mean that your minimum grade should be for this assignment? If it's worth 200 points and I do half of them in class, it means that your minimum grade should be 100 out of 200 if you just turn in what I do in class. There is no reason to get a 0 on homework 8, and yet or 9 or whatever it is, yet every semester I get plenty of students who don't turn it in and just take that hit, even though I do the first 4 at least in class, right? The first 4 at least in class, and I show you how to do it. All right, so don't be that person, right? Submit the code that I do, demo it. I'm giving you that code for free because it's a big assignment and I want to get the ball rolling on you, and I want to show you how I would work through some of these stuff, right? And just as a reminder about the final project, you can do this in any language you want. It doesn't have to be Python, right? I generally, if you want to try something weird and esoteric, I'm generally 100% for that, right? I like weird stuff, okay? I like unusual stuff. I like creative stuff. And, this kind of environment, being a student in a freshman level class, gives you the flexibility that you will not have later in life to be creative, right? Right? When you're making a game to kind of learn something, it's different than making a game to try to sell it, right? Where you're making an artistic project just because it's meaningful to you versus making it so that others find meaning in it. Those are very different things. You get to be very selfish here and focus on you. All right. With that, I think that's all I have got for today. So I can let you out a bit early. All right. So I will send more messages about proposal day, but again, that will be done most likely over Zoom, or I might do it in a combination of in-person or Zoom. The point being is that I'm going to meet on that, and I'll explain in detail. I'm going to meet everybody on that day. And that might take longer than the actual class period, so I'll ask people who can be flexible to be flexible.
Like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
That's okay. Nobody has any idea what they're doing. We're all faking it.